Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about the 7 stanchions of separation, and specifically today we're going to talk about YouTube, and how YouTube is a major separator for Dungeons and Dragons. So Dungeoncraft did this amazing video, linked below, and really just explained in 20 minutes what I've been saying for 2 years on how Dungeons and Dragons is just so far ahead of every other game on the market, and why. It's not a coincidence. It didn't just happen. It was a carefully crafted victory that is coming into full fruition right now in 2022. So let's talk about YouTube. YouTube is a major separator between Dungeons and Dragons and any other game on the planet, any other tabletop role-playing game on the planet. It's just very, very different and very powerful, and very and YouTube makes Dungeons and Dragons a dramatically better game than anything else. And the reason why is basically, so here's the thing, okay? You think you run your dungeon, so there's a good chance you think you run your Dungeons and Dragons campaign in a vacuum, and that your players are getting their fun from your game from you. That is outrageously wrong, okay? One, you help to bring a good experience from that Dungeons and Dragons game, okay? But also, of course, the players are a big part of what makes a Dungeons and Dragons game work, what it makes a Dungeons and Dragons campaign work and really click and really excel into top tier play, okay? Players are in the mix. For Dungeons and Dragons, and really only for Dungeons and Dragons alone, YouTube is a huge part of transforming the play activity to something truly spectacular, right? So Dungeons and Dragons has succeeded on YouTube at a level no other tabletop role-playing game in the world has. There is quite literally over 1,000 D&D commentators on YouTube who do regular content commentating on Dungeons and Dragons, right? So if your players are playing Dungeons and Dragons, right, then what happens is, especially Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, what happens is they go to YouTube and they get the very best creators there are, right? And the reason why is the D&D commentary space is outrageously competitive, okay? Like, who are my competitors? I don't really compete with Nerd Immersion or Ginny D or Dungeoncraft, right? Like, my competitor is OGGM. That guy sits over there, and every week I'm like, do I have more subs? Do I have more videos? Are my videos better? Am I more cogent? Check, go, right? He is the Krispy Kreme to my Dunkin' Donuts, right? Like he pushes me, and he does new things, and he tries new things, right? And then I'm on it, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to beat him this week. I'm going to beat him in the number of views I get, the number of videos I put out, the number of subs I have, and as he creeps up, right, that puts more pressure on me, right? And that same level of competition exists in 100 different directions for Dungeons and Dragons. Oh boy, you want to talk about non-DND YouTube? No Nat 1. Okay, right? Like, who's out there? I don't like. Yeah, there's a few good creators for each game, right? Seth Gorkowski, I think he's a he's a D&D commentator. He does a lot of commentary on non-D&D games, but literally he talks about D&D in that commentary, right? Like, go check out the Simba Room YouTube commentator crowd, right? Like, it gets bad quick, right? So the reality is, you stay in the D&D YouTube sphere, there's some sharks, man, and they bring in real content on the regular, and many of them are trying to go pro. And like Pruitt last year, man, he damaged his mental health to make sure that you had good D&D commentary. Like, he said it flat out, right? Like, it took a part of his soul, all right? Like, people sacrificing to do good D&D commentary. You slide over to Call of Cthulhu or any other game, they might have one or two good commentators, but generally you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. The talent's on the D&D side, right? And your players, right, they are trying to get fun they're trying to get a good play experience. And they're trying to enrich their lives by listening to YouTube so they can play better at your table, right? And if you are taking them to some game other than D&D 5e, you are being cruel to them because you are subjecting them to a level of quality that is laughable compared to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And they got to put up with some just tier 3, tier 4 nonsense commentators, right? Now, we got tier 3, tier 4 nonsense commentators on the D&D side, right? But we got the cream at the top, and there are hundreds of them. You can go 100 deep and find good, sound, really, really good creators, right? And then you could pick from the best of them, right? You slide over to Call of Cthulhu, you might have 100 total, right? And so the cream of the crop might be 1, 2, 3 if you're lucky, right? And then, and then you're stuck, just, making do with these really, really low rank commentators, right? So that's the issue, right? Is YouTube is huge, and YouTube has really, really is a big part of why Dungeons & Dragons absolutely, virtually stomps the gray out of these indie games and why it's an 800-pound gorilla king, just like Dungeon Craft said. All that's my opinion. Love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.